Chicago seemed to hold its breath the day Richard Langley vanished. It was a Thursday morning, the sky overcast and unforgiving. The kind of sky that makes even steel giants like the Langley Tower look tired. In the penthouse suite on the 86th floor, a mug of untouched black coffee cooled on the marble counter while the man who had built the empire stood alone, staring out at the city that once made his heart race. Now it only made it ache. Richard Langley, 66, wore a tailored navy suit, freshly pressed like always. But something in his posture had shifted, something small but seismic. His hands, once symbols of authority with gold cufflinks and gestures that closed billion-dollar deals, now trembled faintly, hidden inside the pockets of his blazer. The house was quiet. Victoria had left before dawn for some benefit event at the Ritz-Carlton. She always left before dawn lately. She claimed it was the traffic, but really she just didn't want to talk. Camille hadn't stayed the night in months, though her Instagram would suggest she practically lived in the penthouse. Carefully curated shots of champagne, staircases and selfies. And Andrew? Well, Andrew didn't come without an appointment. Richard walked to his office. On the mahogany desk lay 3 documents: a letter addressed to his lawyer, a sealed envelope marked private, to be opened after 30 days, and a second will, dated only 2 weeks prior. His signature glared from the bottom, bold and final. He sat. The weight of something irreversible settled in his chest. "You're not eating," the doctor had said just 3 weeks earlier, gently, after going over the results. "And I know why, Richard." "I need a second opinion," Richard had replied, stone-faced. "You've had 3. Pancreatic cancer. Unforgiving, silent. Likely 6 months. Maybe less." The diagnosis hadn't surprised him. The fatigue, the dull ache in his gut, the sudden weight loss. But he hadn't told anyone. Not yet. Because it wasn't just about death. It was about what he'd done with the life. He'd built towers of glass and concrete. Had jets, yachts, access to presidents. But somehow in all the gold and glass he'd lost them: Victoria, Andrew, Camille. Maybe even himself. He couldn't die as the man they already considered gone. So he made a choice. He left the building at 6:12 a.m. without a phone, without his driver. Just a faded Cubs cap, a second-hand coat and a canvas backpack. He passed the security guards with a nod. No one stopped him. In the gray chill of morning, the billionaire disappeared into the anonymity of the city. The first hours were intoxicating. No one watched him. No one greeted him with fake smiles or bent spines. He walked Michigan Avenue like any man might, invisible. By noon his feet hurt. By nightfall he realized how cold the city truly was without car doors, credit cards or invitations. The first night he slept beneath the viaduct near Lower WhAt, wrapped in the thin lining of a donation blanket. It smelled of cigarettes and dust. His back ached. But he didn't close his eyes because of the pain. He stayed awake, watching. Listening. A different Chicago unfolded before him. One of murmured threats and silent kindnesses. By the 3rd day he hadn't eaten more than an apple and half a bagel someone left on a trash can. His body was already betraying him, but his resolve grew stronger. "I seen you before," someone said on day 4. Richard looked up from the bench outside Union Station. A man in a patched army jacket, mid-40s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Doubt it," Richard replied. "Don't lie. You're that real estate guy, Langley." "From the TV." Richard said nothing. "I'm Malik," the man offered, his voice quieter now. "Don't worry. I don't care who you were. Only who you are now." And just like that, Richard met the first person in days who looked at him. Really looked. A week later, Dolores found him. She moved through uptown with a cart full of soup and blankets, her hair tied back in a fading floral scarf. She wasn't part of any major organization, just a woman who believed in showing up. She didn't ask for names. She just said, "You look cold," and gave him a cup of something hot, hands trembling with arthritis but steady with purpose. That night he wept. Silently. Curled against the wall of a closed liquor store, the soup warming his chest more than anything had in years. Back in Lincoln Park, Victoria hosted her gala for homeless outreach, speaking in front of flashing cameras in a $9,000 gown. Andrew was already contacting lawyers to begin the process of declaring his father legally incapacitated. Camille? She posted a selfie with the caption, "So tired of fake people, unamused face, #realinnocently." She didn't recognize her father when she walked by him later that week. Instead, she filmed a funny clip of a hobo near Grant Park mocking his shoes. The world Richard had built was crumbling from the inside, and no one inside it even noticed. But Richard was noticing everything. And he was keeping receipts. By day 11, the novelty of Richard's disappearance had worn off, for everyone but Richard himself. The cold no longer surprised him. Hunger had become a slow, pulsing companion. But what truly stunned him, more than the physical deterioration, was how quickly he became irrelevant. A man once surrounded by assistants, analysts, and global attention now couldn't make eye contact with a barista, let alone get someone to remember his face. On the sidewalk outside the Langley Holdings building, once his own kingdom, he sat still as a statue, a silent observer to his empire's theater. Andrew walked past him that morning. Perfectly groomed, wearing Richard's favorite Tom Ford coat, his son exited a black SUV and adjusted his cashmere scarf before entering the revolving doors. His phone was pressed to his ear. Yes, the power of attorney is in motion. He's gone. For all we know, dead. And if not, I'll find a way. Just make it happen. He didn't see Richard. Or worse, he did and didn't care. That same afternoon, Richard followed a group of volunteers to the steps of an old church in the south side. That's where Dolores had said she'd be. She wasn't hard to spot. Her bright orange sweater clashed with everything around it, and her laugh, full-throated and unpretentious, rose above the urban din like a bird call. "There you are," she said, spotting him. Richard blinked. "You remembered me?" Dolores chuckled. "I forget where I put my keys, but never a face like yours. You look like a man with ghosts." He didn't reply. She handed him a hot sandwich, then sat beside him, letting the silence settle. "You're not like the others," she said finally. "You walk different. Like someone who's not used to giving up space." Richard smiled faintly. "Used to walk through buildings like I owned them." She tilted her head. "Did you?" He shrugged. "Doesn't matter now." Dolores studied him a moment longer, then gently asked, "Is it guilt?" He turned his gaze toward the gray skyline. "Maybe. Or regret. I'm not sure I know the difference anymore." That night, Richard and Malik huddled under the L tracks near Lakeview. The wind was sharp, carrying bits of trash and noise from a nearby bar. "I used to think people like you didn't bleed," Malik said, biting into a protein bar. "Clean suits, bodyguards, private jets. You were gods to people like me." "I wasn't a god," Richard replied. "Just a man. With a good sense of timing." "And now?" Malik asked. Richard exhaled. "Now I'm just a man. Without time." Malik paused mid-bite. "What do you mean?" "Nothing," Richard said quickly. "Just older than I was yesterday." But the words hung between them. Heavy. Telling. Day 15. Camille went live on Instagram in front of her closet. Walls lined with designer shoes, soft lighting carefully arranged to make her eyes glow. "People ask me all the time, like, what do I really value?" she said, flipping her hair. "Honestly? Loyalty. Family. The real ones who never leave you." Richard watched from the back of a downtown shelter, the video playing on a borrowed phone, passed around like gossip. He wanted to laugh. Instead, he felt something colder than anger. Disappointment. She hadn't called him once. Not even to ask if he was okay. The next day, a news headline made Richard's heart thud. Langley Holdings considers leadership transfer amid patriarch's disappearance. The article included a photo of Andrew and Camille at a press conference, speaking solemnly into microphones. Victoria stood behind them, silent, her eyes concealed by oversized sunglasses. Not a single tear. "Dad has always been a man of mystery," Andrew said. "But his absence now, it puts the company and our future at risk. We're doing what we must." Camille nodded, visibly rehearsed. "We're heartbroken, of course. But the board needs stability." Richard lowered the phone. Malik sat beside him. "That your daughter?" He nodded. "She talks like a politician." "No," Richard said. "She talks like me. 20 years ago." That evening, Victoria arrived at a gala hosted by her charity, the Langley Foundation for Housing Equity. Crystal chandeliers shimmered. Violinists played. Tables overflowed with risotto and imported truffles. Outside, 2 blocks away, Richard waited at the corner, wrapped in a blanket Dolores had given him. It was fraying at the edges. He watched his wife emerge from a town car, heels clicking against the pavement. Her makeup was flawless, her expression poised. As she passed him, she glanced, then looked away. No recognition. No hesitation. It wasn't hatred. It was worse. It was nothing. Later, Richard found himself sitting beside a dying fire barrel under the Fullerton Bridge. "I thought if I disappeared," he said to Malik, "they'd miss me. Wonder where I went. Maybe even remember I was human." "And?" Malik asked. Richard stared into the flames. "Turns out I was already gone to them." They just hadn't buried me yet. Malik didn't respond. He simply handed over a cigarette, which Richard accepted for the first time in decades. They smoked in silence, two ghosts beneath the city lights. Day 22. Richard collapsed. It was near North Avenue Beach while helping unload crates of donated goods. The world tilted. A sharp pain sliced through his side, stealing his breath. He crumpled, gasping. Dolores was the first to reach him. "Richard," she cried, kneeling beside him. He clutched her wrist. "Don't take me to a hospital." "Are you insane?" she hissed. "You need a doctor." "No hospitals," he repeated, his voice a whisper. "Not yet." He passed out. When he awoke, he was on a cot inside a small, makeshift shelter run by a local church. A nurse volunteer dabbed a cold cloth on his forehead. "You're burning up," she said. "You need tests." Richard shook his head. "I already had them." She blinked. "You know what this is, don't you?" He nodded. She didn't ask anything else. In the days that followed, Richard became quieter, more observant. But his eyes lost none of their fire. If anything, they burned brighter, because now he wasn't just learning who his family truly was. He was deciding what legacy he would leave behind. It was day 30, a Monday. At exactly 9:07 a.m., Richard Langley stood across the street from the Langley Holdings Tower, staring up at the windows that once reflected his ambition like a mirror. Today they looked like rows of cold eyes, watching him without sympathy. He looked different, clean-shaven, his gray hair trimmed, a charcoal wool suit tailored once again. The only thing that hadn't changed was the silence in his chest, and the thin vial of painkillers in his jacket pocket. He'd slept maybe 2 hours. The fire in his side had flared during the night, but he didn't call anyone. He took that pain as a reminder. This was it. He crossed the street. On the 38th floor, a meeting of the Langley Holdings Executive Board was already underway. Andrew sat at the head of the long glass table, one arm draped confidently over the leather chair. Camille scrolled through her phone beneath the table. Victoria sat to the side, as always perfectly dressed, perfectly poised, but her eyes were bloodshot. Outside, the winter wind howled. Inside, the legal counsel cleared his throat. "As of today, we are moving to transfer primary control to Mr. Andrew Langley and Ms. Camille Langley, under the Emergency Succession Clause. Mr. Langley has been missing for 30 days with no verified communication." Then the doors opened. The entire room froze. Richard Langley stepped inside, his presence like a thunderclap. Calm, deliberate. A ghost walking back into his own grave. Victoria gasped. Camille dropped her phone. Andrew stood slowly. "What the hell?" "Sit down," Richard said. His voice didn't rise, but it cracked like thunder. "Dad," Camille started, breathless. "We thought you were dead?" he interrupted. "You didn't think. You hoped." He walked to the head of the table, pulled out a chair and sat. His back straight. His eyes clear, if shadowed by something only he could see. "Let me save you the trouble," he said, sliding a stack of folders onto the table. "Legal proof that I've been watching. Listening. For 30 days. He looked at Andrew. "You trying to force power of attorney by lying about my mental state. Camille mocking the homeless, including me, in your online circus. And Victoria." He turned to his wife. "You walked past me. Twice. You spoke more to strangers than you did to the man you supposedly built a life with." Victoria's lips parted, but nothing came out. A large monitor was rolled into the room. Richard nodded to a man in the corner, his longtime personal attorney, unseen until now. The lights dimmed. The screen lit up. First came footage, grainy security cams showing Richard sitting in alleys, watching his daughter film content just feet away. Watching Andrew give interviews. Watching Victoria leave events hosted in his name without sparing a glance at the broken man nearby. Then came audio. Malik's voice describing how Richard shared his only blanket with another man one night. Dolores talking about a man who finally started listening after a lifetime of speaking over everyone. Each clip painted a picture not of madness, but of intention. Of clarity. "I didn't disappear," Richard said when the lights came back on. "I descended." He stood. "I needed to see the ground again. To remember what pain felt like, not from a spreadsheet, not from a press release. From the street. And what I saw was that the world is colder than I ever imagined." He turned to Andrew. "But you didn't try to find me. You tried to bury me." He turned to Camille. "You didn't worry. You branded my absence. Made it content." Finally to Victoria. "You said you were saving the world. But you couldn't see the man you married when he stood starving outside your gala. There was a long, tense silence. Camille began to cry. Quietly. As if unsure she was allowed to. Andrew looked furious. "This is emotional blackmail," he said. "You abandoned your company, your family." "I was dying," Richard said. The room went still again. "Pancreatic cancer. Diagnosed 6 weeks before I left. 6 months, maybe. Less now." He placed a doctor's report on the table. "I disappeared to figure out how I wanted to die. And maybe, how I wanted to live the rest of it." Victoria looked at him, truly looked for the first time in years. "Why didn't you tell me? Would it have changed anything?" She didn't answer. "I'm changing my will," Richard continued. "Effective immediately." Andrew slammed his fist on the table. "You can't just." "I can," Richard snapped. "And I did." He opened a folder, revealing the revised document, notarized and final. "Camille and Andrew will receive a small trust, enough to live modestly. The bulk of my estate will be liquidated to fund a new foundation, the Malik Dolores Initiative." He turned to the screen again. A new logo appeared, simple, clean. "This organization will create housing, job training, therapy, and support for Chicago's unhoused community. Malik will serve as executive director." Gasps filled the room. Andrew stood again. "You've lost your mind." "No," Richard said, "I finally used it. Malik taught me what loyalty looks like when there's nothing to gain from it. Dolores reminded me what compassion means when no one is watching." He paused. "They are my legacy. Not buildings. Not boardrooms. People." Victoria stood now, her voice unsteady. "And what about us? You're punishing us for being blind." "No," Richard said. "I'm punishing myself. For raising you to value image over integrity. I gave you everything. And I never taught you what anything meant." He looked down at his hands. "Maybe this is too little, too late. But at least it's something." The boardroom emptied in silence. Camille wept in the hallway. Andrew cursed into his phone. Victoria stood frozen like marble, perfect, lifeless. And Richard? He walked out. Through the lobby, past the security guards who now gave him second glances. Onto the street where the wind bit at his face. But he didn't shiver. He felt clean, alive. Even if just for now. The headlines came fast. Billionaire reappears after month disguised as homeless man, leaves fortune to charity. Langley family cut out of will in shock turn of events. Who are Malik Jackson and Dolores Whitaker? The new faces of philanthropy. Chicago buzzed with curiosity and opinion. News vans parked outside the Langley Tower for days. Financial analysts speculated on market shifts. Think pieces flooded social media. But inside Richard's world, things were quieter. He had no interest in the noise. He'd said what he came to say. Now he had work to do. The office for the Malik Dolores Foundation opened in a small brick building on the edge of Bronzeville. Not a skyscraper. Not even a sign yet. Just a modest space with second-hand furniture, chipped walls, and a few folding chairs. But to Richard, it felt more like a beginning than anything he'd ever built. He sat at a desk near the window watching Malik help a young man fill out a job application. Dolores was in the back organizing donated coats. These weren't workers. They were family now. 3 more clients came through this morning, Dolores said, appearing in the doorway. One of them brought his dog. Hope you don't mind. Richard smiled. Not at all. She looked at him for a long moment. You don't look well today. He waved a hand. It comes and goes. She didn't push. But he knew she could see it. The tremor in his fingers. The way he moved slower now. As if something inside him was folding in. Across the city, the Langley family sat inside their mansion in Lincoln Park. Cold, silent, hollow. Andrew had stopped answering calls. Most of the board had resigned or transitioned. His name was now associated not with legacy but scandal. Camille had gone radio silent on social media after her video mocking her father resurfaced and sparked nationwide outrage. Sponsorships dropped her within days. Victoria wandered from room to room, still perfectly dressed but strangely absent, like a statue still clinging to grace after the temple had collapsed. She kept rereading the final clause of Richard's new will. If they learn to live without my money, perhaps they'll learn to live with themselves. Camille showed up at the foundation 2 weeks later. She wore sunglasses, though it wasn't bright, and stood awkwardly in the doorway until Malik noticed her. Looking for someone? He asked. She hesitated. My father. Malik motioned toward the back. He's inside. Richard was seated in a meeting room, going over blueprints for a transitional housing center they were planning to convert from an abandoned elementary school. He looked up, surprised, not angry, just tired. Camille removed her sunglasses. Her makeup was minimal. Her hands fidgeted with the sleeves of her sweater. "I don't want money," she said quickly. "I know," Richard replied. "You already had it." She flinched. "Then Saturday, I deserved that." They were silent for a long moment. "I came to ask," she started, then stopped. "No, not ask. Just to say, I think I want to help. Not for you. For me." Richard leaned back. "And if I say no? Then I'll help somewhere else. But I hope you don't." He studied her. She wasn't lying. He gestured to a pile of intake forms. "Start with these." Victoria came next. She didn't enter the foundation. She waited outside, standing beside a black town car with tinted windows, watching from across the street. Richard saw her through the window. For 20 minutes she stood still. Then finally, slowly she walked across. He stepped outside. "Vic," he said, not quite warmly but not unkindly either. She took a long breath. "You hurt them." "They hurt themselves," Richard replied. "I just gave them the chance." Victoria nodded. "They were raised by both of us." Silence passed between them. "I'm not here to fight," she said. "I just wanted to see you. Not in a suit. Not on a screen." "You're seeing me now," he said. She stepped closer and for the first time in years touched his hand. "I'm sorry I stopped seeing you before." He nodded. "I have 6 weeks, maybe 8, he said quietly. Tears filled her eyes. "What do you need?" "Nothing," he replied. "That's the point." Andrew never came. He sent lawyers. Filed an appeal against the will. Claimed mental incompetence, coercion, emotional trauma. The case was dismissed in court after 10 minutes. Richard never mentioned him again. The foundation grew slowly. By the end of the first month, they had placed 17 people in temporary housing. 5 had found part-time jobs. 3 had enrolled in GED programs. Richard met with each of them personally, shaking their hands, listening to their stories. "Mr. Langley," a young woman once said, "why are you doing this?" He smiled. "Because I've been poor. And I've been rich. But I've never been needed. Until now." At night, he stayed in a modest apartment above the foundation office. A twin bed. A small kitchen. No television. No distractions. Just peace. Sometimes he'd wake coughing, the illness digging deeper now. He didn't tell anyone. He had no need to. Every day was a victory. One afternoon, Dolores found him asleep in his chair, papers still in his lap. She covered him with a blanket and didn't wake him. When he stirred, he opened one eye and whispered, "Don't say it." She smiled. "Say what?" "That I look like hell." She laughed softly. "You look like someone who's finally honest with himself." Spring arrived quietly in Chicago. The air softened. The sharp edges of winter dulled. For the first time in months, the sidewalks near Bronzeville were full again, not with crowds but with movement that felt hopeful. Inside the Malik Dolores Foundation, sunlight spilled through open windows. Malik was going over case files with a social worker. Camille was arranging a clothing drive in the back room, sorting shoes and coats with sleeves rolled up. Dolores stood by the coffee pot, offering encouragement to a teenage boy who had just moved off the street. And Richard Langley sat by the window, wrapped in a gray wool sweater, watching it all unfold. His body was thinner now, the lines on his face deeper. But his eyes had never looked more alive. He'd stopped hiding the illness. Everyone at the foundation knew. Some cried when they found out. Richard didn't. "I don't want pity," he told Dolores one morning. "I want stories. I want laughter. I want people walking out of this building with something they didn't have when they walked in." "You're getting soft," she teased. "No," he said. "I'm getting free." One afternoon, Camille joined him at the window. "Do you regret anything?" she asked. He took a long breath. "Too many things to count. But mostly, that I let success replace love. That I thought providing was the same as parenting. That I confused building a life with building a legacy." Camille nodded. "And now? Now I know the difference." She reached into her pocket and handed him something, a folded photo. It was an old picture, the 3 of them, Richard, Camille, and Andrew. Camille was a child, sitting on her father's shoulders. Her cheeks were painted with butterfly glitter. "I found it in Mom's drawer," she said. She used to carry it with her. Richard stared at it for a long time. "Thank you," he said, voice hoarse. Victoria visited once more. This time she didn't stay on the sidewalk. She stepped into the foundation, heels soft on the tile. She looked out of place among the crates and boxes, but no one made her feel it. Richard was in the back office. He didn't look surprised to see her. "You came," he said simply. She nodded, folding her hands. "I had to." They sat in silence. "I read your letter," she said. "The one you left with the lawyer. I wasn't sure if you would. I almost didn't." He nodded. "I didn't love you the right way," she admitted. "Not for a long time." "Neither did I." She reached out, took his hand gently. "But I did love you." "I know." Days passed. Then a week. Then two. Richard grew weaker. The walks became shorter. The coughing fits longer. But he refused to leave the foundation. "I want to stay here," he told Malik. "I want to see what we're building." "You already built it," Malik replied. "We're just adding walls." One morning, Dolores found the bed empty. She panicked until she looked outside. Richard was sitting on the front steps, wrapped in his sweater, watching the sun rise over the rooftops. The city buzzed faintly in the distance. The first client of the day, a young man in need of a hot shower and a second chance, waved at him as he passed. Richard waved back. Dolores sat beside him, saying nothing. After a while, Richard turned to her. "You think they'll be okay without me?" She smiled. "They're okay because of you." He looked forward again. "Then I did something right." He passed in his sleep that night. No hospital. No machines. Just quiet. The next morning, the foundation didn't close. It opened early. They held a memorial in the main room, with folding chairs and paper flowers made by clients. There were no black suits, no journalists, no photographers. Just stories. And tears. And laughter. Camille read a short letter. Malik said a prayer. Dolores told the crowd that he finally found the ground again. Then they all got back to work. A month later, the first transitional housing complex opened its doors. The name etched above the entrance read, "The Richard Langley Center for Renewal." Not in gold. Just painted wood. Simple. Human. Victoria donated her penthouse to the foundation. Moved to a smaller home. She now volunteered once a week, not in front of cameras but in the kitchen, chopping vegetables. Camille never returned to full-time influencing. Instead, she started producing a podcast interviewing people with no fixed address. She called it Invisible Stories. The first episode was about her father. Andrew moved to Miami. No one heard much from him again. Chicago began to change quietly. Not because of a foundation. Not because of a billionaire's guilt. But because someone had finally looked at its streets and seen them for what they were. Full of people. Full of potential. Because one man decided in his final days to trade towers for touch and profit for purpose. Because he saw what the world forgot. And helped others remember.